any reading or doctor or psychologist or therapist will tell you that depression and anxiety are very closely linked. And I think I've said this to you before about something else, but anxiety is the worry about future events, and depression is kind of regret or worry about past events. So you kind of, and now you're the human being in the middle, and you've got these two forces kind of, I want to say, tearing at you, or at least opposing you for, hey, I'm scared or I'm anxious about things that have yet to even happen, or if happen at all. And I have depression and regret and maybe sorrow or sadness about things that have happened that I either didn't respond appropriately to, or it didn't live up to what was expected of me in the past. And now here I am in the middle trying to, well, there's not a great way forward because all these horrible things exist for me out there that I could screw up, and people are going to hate me and think less of me. And like, how could I possibly even live up to their expectations next week or a year from now? And in the past, wow, look at all the things I screwed up. What am I doing here? I'm not worthy of being here. I'm a terrible parent, or I'm a terrible pilot, or I'm a terrible teammate from previous experience. And now I'm just in the middle. So
Today we have a very special guest joining us. He is someone who embodies the spirit of resilience and adaptability that we talk about so often on this show. Rick Klauer is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. He has served our country with distinction as a helicopter pilot in both the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Army. He is still flying as a commercial pilot. Rick is also an avid runner, book reader, and all-around good human. But beyond his impressive professional credentials, Rick is a dedicated father and a person that I personally turn to when I need a sanity check. He is a true voice of reason in my life, and I'm honored to have him here with us today. Rick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be here. We've been talking about this for so long. I feel like it's finally arrived. I'm psyched. I'm psyched for your podcast, man.
Yeah, thanks. So let's talk just a quick background on you. Just kind of walk me through Rick. I know that you're from Arizona originally, and you went to the Naval Academy and you became a helicopter pilot. And I want to say, I can't remember if you told me this, or I think maybe I looked it up on the internet. I don't know how I found out, but your dad was a Marine, right, in Vietnam?
Yeah, my dad was a Marine Corps officer, and also my brother was a Marine Corps officer. My youngest brother was Army helicopter pilot as well. My mom is a retired naval officer as well. From the short career was all in the reserves, but she was a captain in '06. So I come from, people say, how'd you get started in the military? Well, I don't consider myself to come from a military family because I didn't know my parents' military service. My father was out before I was he was out long before I was born. And my mom was a reservist. So I would not consider myself to have the traditional military brat experience that a lot of guys did.
Yeah, I didn't know that about your mom. That's super interesting. I knew about your younger brother, but I didn't know about your older brother. So did your parents' military service have an impact on you to go to the Naval Academy? Was that kind of like I don't want to say a forcing function, but were they steering that a little bit, or was it something you wanted to do?
I think unconsciously they were staring at a lot more than they realized, maybe to the good and bad. My mom's career had a pretty large effect on me as a child, or as an elementary school kid, because we'd often travel for her 2-week active duty periods, because she was part of a communications unit that was here, like the headquarters was here in Phoenix, but the comm unit would go for their 2-week summer active duty period, would go to cool places like Hawaii quite a bit, DC, Hawaii quite often actually. So it was kind of a good excuse to take a 2-week family vacation and stay at the Halikoa, which is well known and loved by many military families. So it was a great time and to see and experience a kind of military light, if you will, because it was just her going to work 8 to 5 for 14 days. But meanwhile, we get to hang out on Waikiki and, go see Pearl Harbor and all the stuff that you would do if you were a tourist in Hawaii in 1985. So there was definitely some influence from them. And then the biggest influence was my 6th grade elementary school teacher. Her son was a plebe at the Naval Academy when I was in 6th grade. And he came in at Christmas and wearing his uniform. And man, I like remember that day like it was yesterday, even now, like 45 years later or whatever it is,
Do
seeing
you think
him
he
and meeting.
knows that you had that impact on him?
I don't think he probably knows. I had talked to his mom. Like she knew that I went to Naval Academy, and I always told her, "Hey, you were a huge influence on my life." And he told me to read A Sense of Honor, which is a book by James Webb, a Naval Academy graduate who was later the Secretary of the Navy, to kind of talk, like get an idea of what the Naval Academy was about, like in the Vietnam era. It was a novel. I don't think she probably really understood how profound an impact. I loved her as a teacher, as my 6th grade teacher, and I don't think she quite understood how profound an impact she had on really the rest of my entire future. It was like from that day forward was really changed to kind of I don't want to say a singular direction, but a really kind of defined path.
Right, right. You went to the Naval Academy. What did you major in at the Naval Academy?
I majored in oceanography, which is super helpful as a resident of Phoenix, Arizona. But I liked my major. It was cool. I loved it actually, but it didn't have the kind of postgraduate, I want to say, usefulness that a lot of degrees would have, especially if you don't have something at the PhD level. And there are ways to continue as an oceanographer inside the Navy, but they're pretty limited and without like a physical, like a physical, I don't want to say disability, but a physical limiter, you were expected to go into what was considered like the Navy's like kind of combat arms line. You were expected to be a ship driver, a pilot, a Marine, a submariner, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So you ended up choosing to be a naval aviator, and you flew. Were you telling me, was it H model or B model Seahawks?
B model Seahawks at the time.
That's like
I was
the
a
OG.
West Coast dude. Yeah, I was the OG kind of. It was the OG Hawk. It was the original one off small ships. The Romeo model, which has now since replaced all the B models, and the Sierra model has replaced the Fox model and a lot of the hotel models that were out in the Navy. I think there might be some hotels still kicking around, but the B model was really kind of the premier like 1980s technology that was going to provide like over the horizon targeting capability and surveillance to a small ship. And that was like really the second iteration of helicopter as a sensor on board small ships. So it was cool. It was a good platform. It's now probably arguably a great platform. It's a bunch of navies have bought it worldwide. So it's definitely a cool helicopter. It's not a MH-60 Mike, but it's got a little bit of punch, and it's cool for a sensor platform for single spot ships.
You did the Navy, and how long were you in the Navy? And like, what was the decision to get out? And how would you describe your career in the Navy? Was it good or bad, or what made you decide to leave the Navy?
So backing that question up just a little bit, I think by the time I finished the Naval Academy and then I went to flight school, I remember being in flight school, early in flight school, thinking, God, I am 6 months into a potentially 20-year career, and I am already exhausted with the U.S. Navy. The 4 years of the Naval Academy, it absolutely just ground me down. I was a fairly decent student. I was like right in the middle of the class. I got progressively better as a student there because I kind of like learned how to knuckle down and learn how to study and knew what was important and what I could blow off and to get better grades. And I wish I'd figured that out a lot earlier, but I kind of didn't figure that out until about the halfway point. But I was just exhausted after 4 years. And then you hit the fleet and you're supposed to be all excited. And I remember seeing guys that were out of like OCS and ROTC, and they were all kind of like, I felt like they were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and excited about getting to the fleet and getting to their squadron. And all I could think about was like, God, I've been doing this for 4 years already, and I am just sick and tired of it already. And I haven't done. I mean, this is 1996, and like, world peace has broken out everywhere, and it was just kind of a relative lull for the U.S. Navy. And so I never had the plan in my brain that I was going to spend more than my requisite commitment as an aviator, which was the better part of going to be like 7 to 9 years. So it wasn't in my plan to stay in the military at all. I wanted to just kind of go fly helicopters for a little bit, like kind of punch my ticket, figure out what I want to do afterwards, maybe go to law school, and then kind of just do something else that was not the U.S. military. But I did my fleet tour in San Diego. I had a couple deployments in there. Again, this is all pre-September 11th stuff. I deployed pre-September 11th. And then I was actually working at the Naval Academy as a physical education instructor. Just kind of, it was an easy tour. I wanted it, thinking I was going to go to law school at night. I didn't. I was just a middle of the road LSAT score. So my opportunities to get into Georgetown law were non-existent. But I got out after that because I was done, and I just didn't enjoy my time working at the Naval Academy. It's like I had the opportunity to peek behind a curtain, and I liked it even less than when I was a student there. And it was supposed to be kind of this cushy, great tour. And I really didn't enjoy it at all because I didn't find it satisfying. And there's some similar things that probably you have struggled with. I didn't feel like I was with my people doing what I wanted to do, which was like fly helicopters and do cool stuff. And that was, those opportunities were somewhat limited still. Again, like this is pre-September 11th, and I rolled into a non-flying gig after September 11th. So I just felt like my timing was just abysmal. So I got out. I was not happy when I got out. I got out with no plan. I knew I wasn't going to be able to get into law school because my LSAT score was just, again, straight middle of the road. I got out, and my wife and I, we moved back to Phoenix with very little future plan that was concrete at all. We just moved back thinking, hey, I'm going to go like sell real estate or go work somewhere. She was a school psychologist at the time, and she was going to do that. And we were just going to kind of try to figure it out from there.
Yeah, I think that time, the 90s military was just weird. Now that I look back on it, it was at the time, it seemed like you were LARPing all the time, and then, fast forward to September 11th, and then, combat operations and all that stuff. It just kind of made me appreciate, and not that I thought that wars are great and all that thing, but at the time, you could see the difference between the two. I'm assuming the Navy was the same as the Army. It was, we were training to fight the Krasnovians, and we were still doing kind of Cold War tactics. We still wore flak jackets. And then September 11th happened. There was still like a slow ramp up, at least in the conventional forces. I wasn't in SOF at that time. I think it's probably the same. Did September 11th have an impact on you to go switch to the Army? I mean, you were in the Navy at the time, but when you got out of the Navy and you went back to Phoenix, well, actually, let me double back on that. I did an episode with Tyler, and we talked about purpose. When you got out, did you miss that sense of purpose, or was that a struggle, or was there any anxiety, or how were you feeling during that time that you got out and went back to Phoenix?
I don't, like I was telling you before, I just finished listening to your episode with Tyler, and I don't recall what his answer was, but I think it was probably similar to him in that I know he touched on it. I didn't really miss the U.S. military, and I'll just say the military in general, the Navy or the military, because the Navy and the Army are similar in these ways. Of course they are, because of the armed forces. I didn't miss it until I went and started working like a quote job. My first job was at my sister-in-law got me a job as like a kind of a financial dude at a construction company at the time when construction was booming. And she was just doing me a solid as a guy that really didn't have a great path, but I could fill a need that they needed, like a guy that could kind of do some compliance stuff, like help them write regulations. They had just gotten
Yeah,
purchased.
you weren't like a schmuck off the street. You had a Naval Academy degree,
Yes.
and you were a naval aviator. Like,
Yes.
yeah.
But I was not, I was not an MBA guy. I was not a business dude, but I knew how to read, and I knew how to write, and I knew how to like organize things and conduct operations and stuff that is important at a kind of fledgling medium to, small to medium sized construction company doing residential and commercial construction. So I did that, and I effing hated it. I was in an office kind of with dudes who had not been in the military and did not seem to have a mission focus, or at least seem to care about what we were doing. And maybe I didn't care at all about what we were doing because I was thinking this is not at all rewarding to me. And I just felt like I was an office schmo. I just did not like it. And they were not my people, and they were certainly not my brothers and sisters in arms of the U.S. military. I just could not at all find myself thinking, hey, I want to do this for the rest of my natural life. So I didn't miss it until I really started missing it, which is when I worked a regular civilian job.
I think you talked about you didn't care. And for me, I don't know if it was the same for you, but when you were working in that construction, was it a thing of just the construction thing didn't interest you and therefore you didn't care, or was it because the culture and they couldn't really relate and that kind of drove you to not care? And the reason I kind of separate those two is because a lot of times, like with me, the job I work, which you know because you worked at the same company, that's how we met, is I love the actual job, but I think I'm in love with the potential of what the job could be, and I know what it kinda takes to get it there, but then when you kinda marry that with what is and what the real culture of the company is or what the culture of the client we service, it's never gonna get to the point that it could be that job you love the actual job, but in this case I think you were probably like you didn't actually like the actual job and you didn't like the culture. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a fair assessment. I wish when I got to the construction company, I kind of thought, hey, I was going to, a couple days a week, I'm going to put on a hard hat and put on an orange vest and go out and be with the guys. And we're going to pour concrete and talk about concrete because it was at its heart a concrete company. And like it kind of interested me in the way that, big trucks pour concrete and giant friggin' pumps pump concrete because it's, cool equipment and the military is full of its share of cool equipment. And I thought that would be a part of my role that I would kind of get out to be in that world and, be with the boys out there, like doing labor and building things. And that wasn't part of the job. And that was really no one I worked with in the office. They would have laughed at me if I said, hey, I want to go on the field with the dudes. They'd just be like, no, man, you're an office rat. Like stay here on the fob it. Like there's nothing out there for you.
So you're out of the army, and then how did you get to the guard? Like how did that come to pass?
It came to pass because I wanted to do something that I just felt like I had unfinished business in the military. This is a couple of years later now. It was 2000, maybe this is like 2005 or so. I was completely out of the Navy, living in Phoenix, taking a job at Honeywell. I was a production manager there, which was enjoyable. It was not terrible, but not great. Paid great. And I kind of felt like, oh, I can kind of nestle in here for a little bit. They had a bunch of ex-military people working there. So there was sort of a kind of a favorable military bend to what we did. We were building avionics for large commercial aircraft. And they heavily recruited military junior officers, heavily recruited. So there were like a few of us in there that had very similar backgrounds, similar age, kind of doing similar jobs. And a couple of those guys have actually gone on to do some pretty cool things. But I felt like I had a unfinished business in the military. Honeywell had a really liberal military leave policy, like really liberal. So
Yeah, I remember you told me about that one time. Like,
yeah,
it seemed pretty pimp.
It was great. This is right at kind of the heart, like the high point of combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, 2006, 7 time frame when like real like hard fighting. So
Yeah, I was
lots
there.
of opportunities. Yes, lots of opportunities for guys to deploy. And so I literally called the guard and was like, hey, I know you guys have Hawks there. I want to fly Black Hawk. And it was a little bit of a struggle because they didn't understand that a Seahawk was at its core just a gray Black Hawk. So once I kind of finally got to the right person there, I got into the unit there just walked right in. They're like, hey man, you're a Black Hawk dude now. Went to Rucker for the AQC, but it was pretty seamless to come over once I went to Rucker and kind of figured out, oh, this is how the Army like reads a checklist. This is how the Army, conducts CRM. It was close, but not exact to how the Navy does business as well. So I felt pretty comfortable in the cockpit from the get go and started working at the guard just part time, strictly as a part time dude to kind of supplement my income from Honeywell. And I wasn't there probably 2 months, maybe 2 drills, and they had a full time like mobilization come up to help with border security. This was like a big deal in Arizona at the time, so like 2007. So I worked on a border security mission down there, which was like full time active duty. I left Honeywell. Honeywell kept paying me for like 18 months, which was awesome because I was a W-1 in the U.S. Army for Arizona Army National Guard, but on active duty and also collecting my regular Honeywell paycheck, which was awesome. And I did that for a year and a half and just flew a border mission like down in southern Arizona, like 5 to 6 days a week. It was great. It was a great year of flying, doing some pretty cool stuff, kind of like carte blanche, border patrol support, like search and rescue, the whole shebang, everything that the Hawk is good for.
This is probably like a trivial question, but when you went to Fort Rucker, now Fort Novosel, when you went there, and you had this Navy background, and you get in there and you're a warrant officer in the Army, and you're seeing things the Army way. There had to be a level of like, this is stupid. Like, I'm so stupid, Army. Did you feel that when you were in there? And the reason I bring it up is because the place where I work now and you used to work, we had a bunch of people from different services, and everybody was so cliquish. And I'm putting myself in this camp. Like, you and I have talked about this. Is everybody thinks that their way is the best way, and I think there's probably some truth to that. But primacy is a real thing. And did you come in with kind of a clean slate and an open mind, or did you get there and that primacy kicked in on the way the Navy did things, and you were like, I kind of miss the Navy in this, or what was that like for you?
It was frankly it was a little nerve wracking for me because I hadn't flown a Hawk in probably 3 to 4 years because I was teaching in the Naval Academy and then got out, had like a year and a half break in service. So I'd been out of the cockpit for like a solid 4 years, probably, let's say. I was a little worried about it because it's literally, you jump in, you go to your like CBT or whatever, and then you're in the Hawk. And the first IP I flew with doing my commander's eval there at the AQC was a Marine. No, he was an Army major, but he was a former Marine pilot. So he grabbed me and he said, "Hey man, I know where you come from. I know like kind of your background. Let's go out here and just, show me where you're at, and we'll kind of devise a training plan that works." So it was good to fly with somebody the very first time in the Hawk that kind of spoke the lingo, and he kind of knew what to expect from me, and I felt more comfortable with him. And so we kind of had that commonality in the cockpit of what it was easier for him to point out mistakes that he knew I was going to make up front based on my background. And I felt comfortable with him knowing that we had that shared experience. So it made kind of getting in there a little bit easier. And then once I kind of got my confidence back after that flight, I was like, oh, it's a Black Hawk. It's just like putting on an old glove. It fits. It's a good aircraft to fly. Like, you remember how you flew it 4 years ago, you're going to remember how you do it again. And once I was confident enough in myself to kind of redo it, the whole thing was actually, it was enjoyable because it was new and different to me. And it was just a great review for me. And the class was full of a bunch of weirdos. Like, there was like an army guy, Apache retread. There were a couple of Norwegians in there. So it was a kind of a grab bag of one-offs, if you will. Everybody had a kind of a different experience. So it was good I was just one of those like one-offs, like the rest of the guys in the class.
Did you have was that different from in the Navy? In the Army, for everybody who's the uninitiated, is the Army makes you memorize every single limit of the helicopter. And by limits, I mean like what the transmission oil pressures are, what the transmission oil temperatures are, what the engine oil temperature is, what the engine oil pressure is, what our torque limits are, what our TGT, which is turbine gas temperature. It's fairly robust. And we also have to memorize verbatim the emergency procedures. And is that the same in the Navy, or is that like a weird Army thing?
No, that's the same in the Navy. It's the same chapter 5 and chapter 9 test that you take in the Navy.
It's the same.
The same. That's the same.
Yeah, because I think the Air Force, they don't do that, which is strange to me. Whatever. I mean, Air Force.
Flight engineer will read it
disrespect to you. Intended. I am kind of kidding, but when you look at all the services, Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force, the Air Force, I don't know what it is. It's just like their culture. Just every day when I go through the gate at the place I work, I see these Air Force airmen, and I'm like, God, help our country. But that sounds terrible. And I don't really mean that. It's just, I'm sure when I came in the Army, all the old guys were like, we're doomed. These kids aren't going to do anything, so it's probably just old guyisms. But so you're in flight school, or not really flight school. It's just the aircraft qualification course. And then you go back to Arizona and you did the border thing. And then at some point you switched to AGR, full active duty, but in the Guard.
Yes. It was right when that border mission was wrapping up. I had again, kind of once in a lifetime opportunity, because the active Guard reserve, for those that are not familiar with how the Guard and reserve component work, there's a contingent of guys that are active duty soldiers within the guard and the reserve components that comprise about 10% of the overall strength of the guard and reserve themselves that run the guard and the reserve on the day-to-day basis. Because your traditional guardsmen, your what's called an M day from mobilization day, but they're referred to as traditional guardsmen or traditional reservists. Those guys typically only show up one weekend a month. Yes, as aviators, they will show up quite a bit more often than that, but they're only required to be there one weekend a month and then 2 weeks, typically during the summer. But the active guard reserve, the AGR, the active guard reserve force, we kind of administer the program Monday through Friday. The rest of the time, the aircraft need maintenance. You can't just do maintenance on a Black Hawk, 1 weekend a month. That doesn't work that way. So I was an instructor. They had a couple openings come up for instructor pilots. Myself and another W4 that was coming over from California both applied and got it. And it was, to this day, I almost can't believe my luck in getting that, because those positions just don't come open. Someone needs to die or retire for those positions to come available. And it's really not that far from the truth. They're so hard to get, and they're such a great opportunity for guys, especially like me that had a handful of active duty time already. I was 10 years active already when I came into that position. So really I was halfway to retirement, able to work at a facility that I would never have to leave for the next 10 years. It was 20 minutes from my house, and flying a Black Hawk, which I already was doing anyway. So it was just a terrific opportunity for me. And I left Honeywell for that and spent 10 years in the Guard doing the thing as an AGR instructor pilot, as maintenance test pilot.
Yeah, and you'd be proud. I did a maintenance test flight today. I did a max power check just after 2 engine swaps. So
you're bringing all grown up now. My eye, man.
So we met by a mutual friend, Brent. Brent called me and was like, "Hey, I got this guy that's applied for a job at your place. Do you think you could help him out?" And I was like, "Look, if he's a friend of yours, he's a friend of mine." So that's when I called Noel, our old boss, and said, "We got to get this guy." And then COVID happened yet? I feel like you were right before COVID.
No, it was right. I literally my start date kept getting bumped because they weren't sure. Noel could not figure out when I was supposed to report, because like everybody was working remotely. And then it was like, I was going to start on like April 1st. And it was like May 1st.
It was like summer of 2020 you got there, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I can't keep them straight between you and Greg. We have another mutual friend, Greg, who I knew in a former life. And Greg was applying about the same time, maybe a couple months after you. But so then you came to work for us, and then you were up as an instructor pilot and a maintenance. Were you an ME right off? Were you?
Yeah.
Was that later, or was that?
No, I was an ME right off. It was me and another guy who had left, and then it was
which was hilarious because like he went home on break from Afghanistan, and he was flying a 46. He was supposed to come back and go through the Black Hawk refresher training, and he just never showed up. And then he never went back to Afghanistan. And I'm pretty sure this dude went for like 6 or 8 months on the payroll, and they called the sheriff because they couldn't get up with this guy. And it was a baller move. It was a boss move. And I'm sure he made like 6 months of pay off of us.
Good for him. That is wild.
Good, yeah, exactly. Good for you. So then you went over to Afghanistan, and you're doing the 90-30 rotation. I remember I did a
180 in there as well.
Yeah. You got rode pretty hard, because that was during the COVID times, and that whole time was just such a weird time. And I remember like your first, I want to say it was like your first like 2 weeks, we had the whole thing where the radios got swapped, and like there was just so much drama. And this is probably like above everybody else's head here, but there was a lot of drama. And I remember you had called me back, and I could hear the genuine concern in your voice that you thought you might lose your job over something that really your actual supervisor at the time did, but kind of pinned it on you. And we don't have to get into details, mainly because I still work here, but that was like some serious. I could remember like you at the time felt like your job was in jeopardy, right?
Oh, 100%. I still remember the night that happened and that whole thing exploded on the ramp after a night flight at like 10 o'clock at night in Kabul in the darkness. And I went back to my room thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. And I didn't know what to do. I'd never been fired from a job, never been close to getting like really disciplined at a job. I like always considered myself a good employee anywhere in the military or civilian world. And to think that I was going to show up and be kind of the like, hey, this is our one Black Hawk only pilot because everybody else was kind of flying both airframes or hadn't been fully transitioned into the Black Hawk yet. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. And I was happy to be there because it was a great opportunity and was kind of, I felt like we were kind of breaking new ground as far as the like where the Hawk was with the company at the time. And it just, man, that was a really, really stressful kind of couple days before that, maybe. And then like after that, certainly for almost a couple weeks, the fallout from that, man, was just months of HR fallout for a lot of people, for the whole program. Really, it was a hard time.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, you came out no issues.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, I was
And
fine, and I don't like in my own personal defense. Like I didn't do anything wrong.
yeah,
I was just
well,
like
it was
just
like your second or third, or you were like inside of like 2 weeks being there.
oh,
Or something. It was
absolutely,
something
absolutely,
like
yes.
like
I was like 3 days out of
crazy.
quarantine. Yeah, right. It was like a
Yeah,
14-day quarantine, and then I show up and meet all these people, and then this whole thing goes down, and I'm literally just the newest guy there.
yeah, and I think when you look back, this is like a thing I've learned in probably the last 2 years is when I just brought that up and you look back on it and at the time you think about your level of anxiety and stress and gnashing of the teeth at that time. Now you fast forward to here, you probably didn't remember it until we talked about it. Or am I the only one that does that?
No, I've remembered it, but it was mostly I kind of remember it as more of a almost want to say like kind of a funny story now, which is probably more of a commentary on how the human brain processes memories, but it didn't seem nearly as like emotionally traumatic for me now, obviously, as it did then in the summer of 2022 in Kabul, Afghanistan. But for as emotionally ringing as that event was for me personally, it doesn't seem to have the weight now, which is we probably can get into that, but it doesn't seem to have the weight for me now as a real potential life crisis as I thought it would be then.
Do you think that's because just time has kind of tamped it down, or is there anything that you have done to kind of work through that? If that, I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying.
No, 100% makes sense. I think a lot of it is the passage of time has kind of allowed me to reflect on that and kind of have some scar tissue develop over that, and also separation from the event itself. Right? It's not like when you're in the thick of it, if it's, the release point of a target or it's just a weird, nasty, confusing HR situation in the company or whatever, creating some distance, whether it be physical distance or time distance or emotional distance from that event is really what's going to allow you to kind of step back and make more clear-headed decisions that don't have that external pressure, that don't have the pressure of, hey, I think I'm going to get fired in the next 12 hours. Removing yourself from that, I think, and either kind of just by mentally removing yourself and looking back and say, hey, okay, maybe I'm not going to get fired. And if I do get fired, so what? Like, is it that big of a deal? Like, I'm going to go home and find a different job. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah,
It's easy to say that now.
I kind of, yeah, when you talk about those experiences, at least for me, I have this bad habit of, and it's from years of the 160th. Like I would say that those years immensely helped me as a human, but there's a duality there where there was definitely some emotional damage or psychological things. And the part of the thing I do now is if I was in your shoes at the time, my thought would have been like, okay, I've got to get my resume ready. I would be 7 layers of contingencies of how to prepare for this. And the thing hadn't even happened yet. I mean, I'd literally do it all the time. It actually happened today. I sent an email to somebody and my email was actually, these folks. I sent they had emailed me about a problem with an aircraft, and it kind of was like a problem they could solve at their level. And I had asked some questions, and they came back with not a curt answer because you can't really hear tone in email, but it was just kind of I was kind of like, what the fuck? Like, why are you asking me if you can handle this at your level? Like, just handle it. And my brain immediately went into contingency mode of, okay, when he emails me back, I'm gonna respond with this, and I gotta think through here. And I'm doing this mental chess game before the thing ever happens. Does that ever happen to you, or am I the only weirdo that does that?
No, that's absolutely coping mechanism is attempting to either plan for the next thing or figure out immediately how to solve the crisis at hand when maybe the solution isn't apparent in the first 30 seconds or minute of the problem unfolding. Maybe it's going to take a little while for some information gathering or just waiting for the next thing. It's funny you say it about email because, again, this is like such a small thing that happened to me like 2 days ago. But my piece of shit car that's a 2007 Nissan Pathfinder. I hope he doesn't hear me talking about him because I want my car to continue running for like the next 20 years. But I was at a red light in the left turn lane. It's 110 degrees outside in Phoenix, Arizona, and the friggin' thing dies right in the left turn lane. And like I'm at the front of the left turn lane. And I was like, oh my God, what is happening? Like my car really doesn't have problems. It's actually a pretty decent car. And I'm sitting there and all I could think about was like, oh my God. Like the first thing that came to my mind is like I try to restart it, obviously. You can't. So now the thing's dead. It's just like wouldn't turn over. It sounds like a fuel pump to me. And I'm like, oh shit, there's like 10 cars behind me. It's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's 110 degrees. The lady behind me starts honking. I put on my emergency blinkers. She starts honking at me. I'm like telling her to go around. And the first thing that runs through my mind is, oh my God, I need to buy a new car. Do I have enough money to buy a new car? Or like, can I get the Toyota 4Runner or the Toyota 4Runner that I really want? Like, that's not the problem right now. That's like 10 to 15 steps down the line. And I'm immediately worried about, can I buy a new car? Do I have enough money to buy a new car? Should I finance that car? Should I just take cash? All I'm doing is sitting in a broken ass piece of shit in the left turn lane. And the problem at hand is, hey, dummy, why don't you just get your car in the left turn lane so these poor helpless people behind you can continue on with their day? So, okay, so I compartmentalize a little bit. All right, let's immediately attack the 10-meter target. Gotta get this car out of the left turn lane. Well, it's a super busy intersection. I was like, whatever. I'm like, my shop is like 2 miles away. I'm just going to call a tow truck and see if I can get a tow. Explain to the guy. He's like, hey, man, it'll be 45 minutes. I'm thinking, I cannot sit in this super busy intersection. Hey, it's a little bit dangerous the way the intersection is set up. And I was not at all going to sit there for 45 minutes in the heat with all kinds of people behind me in rush hour traffic. So I was either going to push the thing and hopefully, somebody, good citizen, gets out and also helps me push it, or I was going to get it restarted because I could not wait for a tow. So waited like another 5 minutes, attempt to crank it. Finally, the thing cranks and I get it to a parking lot on the shop. Anyway, my point is before I actually got into the nuts and bolts of, hey man, just get your car restarted and get it out to a parking lot. And then think about like, what do you want to do? Do you just want to like burn the thing down here and like go buy a new car tonight? Do I want to drive it to a shop? But I was all worried about 18 other things that were not at all important when I was in the left turn lane with people behind me. Like my initial response should have been like, hey man, like just get out and push the thing. You're like, traffic will probably stop for you, or you'll just get squished in a horrible, T-bone accident, kind of push your truck out of the road. But should have just taken another 10 seconds. I kind of reflecting on it, I did a little better than I might have done a few years ago, but I think I could have done better by just like picking up my phone, calling the tow truck company. The tow guy was nice, but he was just like, hey, it's going to be 45 minutes. So I just needed more, I think, again, creating more space to make a decision.
Yeah, see, I kind of do that, but I add a layer of like something similar to that has happened to me before, but I put in a layer of everybody behind me hates me right now. and they
Oh,
personally
sure.
hate like they hate this guy, like I'm that guy right now. And the truth is, like, fuck all these people, they have no idea who I am. But in that moment, like, you're embarrassed, and they're like, everybody's judging me because my car broke down. And and the reality is, when you're behind somebody like that, if I can, I will stop and jump out. But I don't always do that. Sometimes I'm in a hurry and I'm like, man, it sucks for you. Like, I gotta get mine. But I go to that a lot. But do you think that contingency mindset is from the military and is a form of anxiety, or do you think that's a good, prudent planning, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I think that cuts both ways, man. I think there's a lot of benefit to having created multiple scenarios that can work to the good and kind of give you an out. If A, then B, kind of if A, then C, or if B, then D, that kind of thing, and follow that decision tree down. I think that's a valuable tool in life, and obviously in the military, and especially in aviation and just the ground force stuff. But I think in regular human day to day life, that maybe that goes a layer too far to the anxious side, too far to the bad, and that we're not even, because 99.9% of the time in our day to day lives that exist for Thad and Rick in the United States of America today don't involve life and death decisions. You and I are the worst thing that is going to happen with my car breaking down is I was going to like be late to work and miss my flight, or I was going to be late to pick up my son, all of which can be easily rectified with a cell phone. A lot of times those luxuries are not possible in a military environment because literally people's lives are depending on you bringing your equipment to bear, like on time, on target. And if those things don't happen, there is a good chance that someone is not going to live through that engagement. But that doesn't happen on a day-to-day basis for a majority of the population, maybe excluding like a very small percentage of first responders that kind of work in that like a really heavy tactical environment on a day-to-day basis. And for me, just making the first good decision is probably probably the best thing that I can do for myself, and give myself time to make that decision, and not really worrying about it, the second, third, fourth order effects of that decision. But hey, just make the best decision you can today, right now, with the information you have on hand, and then we'll handle whatever secondary effects are with it later, instead of trying to think out the entire chess match after the first pawn has been moved two spaces. Like that, like I cannot run. I am not capable of running my life where I can play an entire chess game after one move. I just, in order to kind of keep my own anxiety in check, I just have to work on 10-meter targets, and maybe a 50-meter target if it's something that I know I can handle.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head where you said, if you don't pick your son up, it's not the end of the world, or if you're late or whatever. And it's kind of, are you familiar with those cognitive distortions? Are
Yes,
you familiar
yes,
with that?
yes.
So, like, deal with a lot of those, and I would have been in that situation. I think actually it happened yesterday during Father's Day, which, happy belated Father's Day. Was
Thank
yesterday?
you.
No, the day before was
Day
Father's
before,
Day.
yes.
So
To you as well.
I think Father's Day is kind of a bullshit holiday. Am I the only one? Do you think so, or do you like it?
It's all right. I mean, like, just like went over to my parents' house and like had barbecue, and my kids were there. So like, I mean, it was a solid B.
It's just like, I feel like my wife makes it out to be this big thing, and she kind of is tells the kids, make sure you get, do this. And like, I got some cool gifts, but it's not the same as Mother's Day. I think women kind of
Oh, definitely.
like
Oh,
really need that, and people kind of respect Mother's Day a little bit. I feel like Father's Day is like just like a B movie holiday. It's like it went straight to. I was gonna say it went straight to video, but nothing that doesn't even make sense
it's
anymore.
a
But
it's a
you know what I
Netflix
mean? Like,
original. Yeah.
it's like, meh, yeah, like you said, it's a solid B.
Yeah.
But something happened. Like, I was not. My Father's Day was not. My kids were great. My wife was great. It's just a weird time for, like, I don't like my birthdays and holidays, or Father's Day in particular. I just don't like. I don't like when it's about me, and especially when it's about me as a father, because this I'm like way off the script right now, but I'm just gonna go with it. The Not that we have a script, but the Father's Day just feels like I'm celebrating me being like a shitty dad. And I know that like and the whole point to kind of go to tie it back into the car situation is something happened yesterday. Like my son made a mess and like I just kind of flipped out on him a little bit, and I could just see it in his eyes like he was genuinely like hurt from what I said to him. And it was kind of that cognitive distortion of all or nothing. Like I yelled at my kid on one day on Father's Day, I'm the worst dad ever. And just like you said, if you're late to pick up your son, I would go, this whole thing is a failure, I'm a failure. Like that one little instance in that day, if my car broke down in the left lane, it would have completely wrecked my day, like in possibly into the next day. Like I would just have a chip on my shoulder all day, and I'm learning to deal with that. But I think it's good that you're talking about living one day at a time, or I'm paraphrasing what you said, but the 10-meter target, dealing with the present. I'm like a fucking time traveler. I live in the future, which is fucking exhausting, right? Like you
Yeah, man.
said, like you don't have the bandwidth to play this chess game, and like when you do, you're just tired all the time. Does that Am I off base, or are you dealing with any of that, or how has that been for you?
No, 100%, man. You hit it exactly on the head of one of the major personality flaws, or I guess maybe just like mental health issues that I have is the side of any reading or doctor or psychologist or therapist will tell you that depression and anxiety are very closely linked. And I think I've said this to you before about something else, but anxiety is the worry about future events, and depression is kind of regret or worry about past events. So you kind of, and now you're the human being in the middle. You've got these two forces kind of, I want to say, tearing at you, or at least opposing you for, hey, I'm scared, or I'm anxious about things that have yet to even happen, or if happen at all. And I have depression and regret and maybe sorrow, or sadness about things that have happened that I either didn't respond appropriately to, or it didn't live up to what was expected of me in the past. So, and now here I am in the middle trying to, well, there's not a great way forward because all these horrible things exist for me out there that I could screw up, and people are going to hate me and think less of me. And like, how could I possibly even live up to their expectations next week or a year from now? And in the past, wow, look at all the things I've screwed up. What am I doing here? I'm not worthy of being here. I'm a terrible parent, or I'm a terrible pilot, or I'm a terrible teammate from previous experience. And now I'm just in the middle. So really, there's not a safe space for me. But really, for me, kind of right now, at least in my life, the middle is kind of my safe space. I want to say, like, full disclosure, I don't go to therapy or anything like that. I just kind of, this is just how I feel right now in my life, that I don't have a great way to look forward, and I could not possibly tell you what my life would look like in 5 years. Maybe I kind of have like a 6 month to 1 year, 2 year target, but I don't have a great. Maybe 5 years ago, I could have told you what my life would look like 5 years from now, at least what I thought my life would look like. I don't have a particularly concrete outlook on life, so that is a source of anxiety for me. And in the past, certainly, I have. There's a lot of things that I have. I want to say I regret, not necessarily behavior, but just the way that I feel about myself, or the choices I've made in this life that I could have done better, or I feel like I haven't lived up to people's expectations, or I'm just I'm an imposter in like the world's largest scam, which is my life. So I don't know. You hit on the head though, because it's certainly, living in the future is not a great place for me.
No, it's exhausting, and I think what's important, and that's kind of why, and you and I have talked about this, and to kind of not to backtrack from this topic because it's this is where we want to be. But back when Afghanistan fell, you were actually there on the like you were one of the last American. I remember you were texting me, like sending me pictures of you guys floor loaded in a C-17. Like you were like, dude, I don't know if we're gonna make it out. Like, and then you came back here to Florida and we're working a little bit. And I remember we went to Benson's birthday party, and
Yeah.
that's when I got drunk and threw up all in my wife's new car. And
Oh yeah.
I think we were like pretty bombed at
I'll say
your
that.
place before we even got there.
Yes.
But I remember we had talked about anxiety, and I was like, "Hey, I want to do a podcast because I think therapy is good." The problem with therapy is I've only ever had one therapist that the Army and special operations community, it's mandated that you go see, if depending on the position you're in. At the time I was there, it was mandated that you would go to the command psychologist. And she was like really broadened my horizons on mental health. Although truthfully, she didn't talk very much. She just let me verbally diarrhea every day. So when you said you don't go to therapy, like that's the whole point of this podcast is like, this is my therapy. It is just talking because everybody probably goes through this. And men, especially men, at least this is my experience, is if you're married or you have a partner, it briefs well when they say like, "Oh, you can tell me anything." But the real truth is, and this is, let me preface this by saying like my wife is a saint and I love her and she is everything for me. But women historically look to their men to be like the strong, everything's okay, a stiff upper lip, and then they usually have a girlfriend that they get into like the real emotional side. And sometimes your wife might have that relationship with the male, but the minute that the man kind of becomes really emotionally vulnerable, women like to say that they like that, but I don't think that's true. And again, there's nothing, I'm not saying that about my wife. She wants to want that, but I don't think biologically we're made for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that is 100% accurate, at least in my experience. And as an ex-husband of a couple of years now, and my ex and I are still on great terms. We're very close. I will tell you that we just weren't working for each other. There was no defining event. For back to you, and you know all this that, but there was no defining event in my marriage that led to its downfall, with like infidelity or violence or substance abuse, anything like that. It was just I certainly was not right for her. Maybe I thought she was right for me, but I certainly was not. And she was a school psychologist by trade, which is not a like psychologist PhD, but she has an undergrad in psychology. And she would tell you, and I'll like and me being honest, like I wore her down with my wanting to talk about my own issues. And looking back, it was probably selfish on my part, but it was probably just exhausting for her. And maybe it
Well,
wasn't the
I don't,
role that she wanted.
yeah, I don't know if it was exhausting for her. It's just the world pitches that we should be co partners and emotionally on the same wavelengths. I don't think like somewhere in your DNA, that's not really the way it works. And like thousands of years ago, like we would go out and kill a buffalo or woolly mammoth or something, and like they would do whatever, weave baskets and stuff, and like somewhere that's still in there. And women want to say they want their men to be emotionally available, but then when they are, they're like, "Ugh, but can you protect me in a fight?" kind of thing. Like there's some kind of weird connection there. And I'm not saying this that it's a flaw. I think this is just how it is. And that's why this podcast is you kind of have to have these conversations with other men, because women, as much as they will tell you that they understand, and I kind of got to call bullshit because they want to, but I just don't know if they have the same view. Does that, like, I knew a couple that the husband was kind of effeminate and couldn't didn't really build things, or just didn't do like typical manly things. And for years the wife, that was kind of like a badge of honor for them, like. And then she kind of let it slip one day that, "Oh, I wish he could build." There was an element of her that wanted like a manly man. And though this isn't the exact same thing, I'm just using it as a bridge to show that women don't necessarily want a guy to be emotionally vulnerable to them. There's a time and a place. Like it would be acceptable to be emotionally vulnerable about your kids, because those two things you can connect on. But if you're emotionally vulnerable about something you're dealing with, somewhere in the back of her mind, she's like, I just need you to go fucking kill a mammoth right now. Like, that's your job. And maybe I'm out there on another planet, but I think that's probably the reality. And some people will never get to the point that you guys got to, and they'll live their entire life with that resentment towards one or the other. But I think in your case, I think if from our talks, you're probably in a better place now. I mean, not on everything, but I remember when this first happened to you, talking to you from when you first told me to 6 months, a year later, there's a drastic difference, right? Would you say that's accurate?
Oh, 100%. It was, as a person who was married for like almost 20 years to the day, and like actually it was actually well over 20 years by the time that we were actually legally divorced. It was the hardest thing I've ever dealt with. I mean, it was, I've never lost anyone. My parents are still alive. I've never lost anyone really, really, really close to me. I lost my older brother, who's my half brother, but we didn't have the chance to get really close in life until much later. And it was hard for me, but it wasn't. We just didn't have that close enough bond. Anyway, so that my divorce was the seminal event for my life when it came to wrestling with adversity, sorrow, and processing grief. All those things that you would associate with the death of a loved one is what I experienced in my divorce. And I read a lot. I did not talk to a lot of people, like save for you and my parents actually were still married, just because I didn't really know who to even talk to, or if they would want to talk about things that I needed to talk about. And it was absolutely the hardest thing I'd ever had to deal with. I had to go, when I was still working at our company, I had to go back to Iraq at the time from like a final 30-day hitch working there, because I said I'd come back for one more 30-day pump before I left the company. I'd already submitted a resignation letter when I came home on leave for like 3 weeks. And my wife at the time told me she wanted a divorce. The night that I got home, actually, and I felt like the earth shifted beneath my feet. It absolutely like threw me from a spiral. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to talk to. I couldn't believe it was happening. I either glossed over the warning signs. In retrospect, clearly there. I just didn't. It was just like I didn't think what happened to me, and it did, and I made it through a really, really difficult, probably year and a half ish. And I've emerged mostly unscathed. Certainly a different person, different outlook on life, different kind of reprioritize my goals, a lot of stuff. But she and I are still close. I'm extraordinarily close to my kids. We're both in high school or recently graduated. So it was the thing that upended my life, and really I had to kind of pull, in a short amount of time, had to pull together some non-existent skills for coping, and also rely on, or more heavily rely on, skills that I already had in place just from being an adult human, for dealing with adversity and compartmentalizing and getting out of bed and going to work. Those kind of things were initially, those were hard for me.
Did you think during that time did you have was your anxiety like turned up to 11, or was it more, was there, I mean, and you don't have to get into it, but I'm assuming there was some level of depression there.
100%. It was like both of them all at once. It was like everything all at once. It was depression and regret about 20 years of decisions that I wish I could take back, or things that I wish I had done or hadn't done. And then there was anxiety about the future of, oh my God, how can I possibly live without this person? How am I going to see the kids? What are we going to do with the house? What are we going to do about our retirement account? And then every millionth order effect that all of those things had to deal with. And how will I possibly live when I'm 75? Who is going to, who am I going to be there with, take care of each other when we're both old and gray? All that kind of stuff that, again, not super important in the moment, but the most important thing in the moment is literally letting the smoke clear to find the exits, and then walk outside of the burning building and start formulating a plan once you kind of get your own body, your physical body and your mental body, to a place of well-being. So there was the worst depression I've had in my entire life, and also the most extreme levels of anxiety that all came together right. And I had to go back to Iraq, and I had to fly every day. It was a hard case for me, and it was hard to cut. And then I knew I had to come back home and live with this person, and then try to untangle our lives to and be respectful to each other, and treat each other as friends and humans, but also unentangle our mutual like financial and life interests.
Yeah, I think it says a lot to your character that you can be not angry. I'm sure there's some anger at some levels, but that you have kind of just worked past that and you guys are friends and, you're still able to parent, because my parents are divorced. They got separated when I was probably 3 and then divorced when I was 5 or 6. And the only memory I have is if my mom and my dad were in the same like space and time, it would be a fight, or it would be my mom would stay in the car and make a comment about my dad, and then I'd get out of the car, and then my dad would make some snide comment about like they hated each other. I think they probably still hate each other, and they're in their 70s, and they would maybe see each other at like my sister's dance recital or something, and like it would be like across the room, or they didn't actually occupy the same space until I retired from the army, and they both were at my army retirement. And I don't really think they ever had a conversation. Thank God for my stepdad, because he kind of reminds me of you. He's very calm and collected and can kind of put aside the differences for the time to de-escalate a situation. So my stepdad actually engaged with my dad, even though he knows all the drama between them. But anyways, but when you talk about depression and anxiety, was there a level of anger inside of that too? I would assume there was in the early stages, right?
Yeah, I think there was. I don't consider myself an angry person. I come from probably what would be considered an angry father. He's got his own issues. My mother has her own issues. They're still married. That's debatable whether they should have been married at all. But so my modeling for anger management was, let's say, not great. But yeah, I certainly had a level of anger, but I knew that I could not let that piece dominate how I was going to handle the separation period. We were still living together. We had a house that had a detached guest house at the time. So I just moved to the guest house, which was not a big deal, but it's still early life away. So yes, there was a level of anger in the sense that I didn't feel like I was being given the chance to correct the situation, or make a course change, or get to therapy, or get to couples therapy, or do whatever it takes, because I was committed to doing what it takes. She was just done, which is completely within her right. I don't necessarily fault her for that. I wish I would have the opportunity to make change, because I think there might have been some room for improvement there. He's fine. But anyway, again, water on the bridge. But yeah, there was anger. I didn't act on it though, because I'm not. I mean, there were. I don't know. She had some words more than a few times, but it wasn't something that let dominate my handling of the situation. If she wanted to grade our divorce period, because I'd give it like a probably B minus on how I handled it. Is I did pretty good. Things that I changed for me. The biggest thing was staying engaged on something that was already important to me. And that, for me, that was running. And I know it sounds maybe cliche and stupid, but when she told me that night, I couldn't sleep. I was just going to sleep on the couch anyway. But the night she told me that she wanted a divorce, they basically like, I want a divorce. Final answer. Like, there's no argument. It's over. Like, let's move on. I went for like an 11-mile run, 1 in the morning. I could not sleep. I was like, I was coming out of my skin, and I literally just like, oh, I got to do something, or I'm gonna sit here, and like my anxiety is gonna absolutely like just crush me into a ball. And so I went for a run, and it was like I hadn't run 11 miles in like a year or two, because like whatever, I'm just gonna see how I feel. Yeah. And it helped, and it was I still remember like I around the same so long. It helped me clear my mind. I don't want to with music or phone anywhere. I just get out there and like listen to the night sounds, or have that on. So it's in that way, it's a good way for me to it's almost a meditative experience. I don't meditate like I used to, but for me, running just without headphones, without music, especially in the dark, is extremely therapeutic for me. I love just hearing animals and little creatures out there that you would otherwise not expect to see or encounter. Just really long.
Yeah, I remember you used to always be up at like 4 in the morning to go for a run. That I think physical activity when you're dealing with anxiety is it's pretty clutch. I think I don't know if I told you this, but I'm in the gym now 3 days a week, courtesy of my wife, who's kind of motivated me to get back in the gym. But it's so important. Now it's to the point where when I've had a bad day, I've like in my head, I'm like, I just got to get to the gym and just move heavy things. And I want to say you and I talked about this. There was like a Rich Roll podcast episode about maybe it was about anxiety and exercise and the benefits, but it's very clear if people are dealing with anxiety, a very low threat way to deal with it is just move your body, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's not a I think there's a cheaper or less controversial recommendation for dealing with anxiety and depression than physical exercise. I cannot speak to the mechanism of why that helps, but it's the whole idea of just getting out there and oxygenating your blood and moving your limbs, and allowing your head to be placed in situations that demand stress on your body and overcoming that stress that is not mentally imposed on yourself is good for your body. I don't think nobody argues that. There's even one of the books that I is still in my nightstand called Feeling Good. It was written in the 80s, anxiety and depression, and it's really kind of really well regarded work. Real, I want to say, traditional methods of treating anxiety and depression. Yeah, one of his recommendations is exercise. It's always been part, and Rich Roll has the speaks openly about his anxiety and depression and substance use, and people tell you that it was a huge part of his life too. When he was living in San Francisco as a recovering alcoholic, to get out there and exercise. And like I ran 11 miles, like Rich ran like 50, just like at the drop of a hat. So he was like, oh, I'm done drinking. I'm just going to run.
Yeah, I think it's in that same vein for me is, my wife has a trainer. She's in nursing school right now, so this is my humble brag on my wife, but she was doing bodybuilding
Also
competitions and
competitive, yes, competitive bodybuilder.
yeah, and so the trainer, if you have the means and you can get a good trainer, I don't really need George as our trainer. We call him coach. He's awesome. I don't really need him. Like I can go to the gym and my form's good. I know what to do. Like he is worth his weight in gold because it is accountability and it's what keeps me in there. And now I'm almost like I'm kind of planed out and I'm on autopilot where now I need to regulate by going to the gym and lifting weights. And, in that same vein as we kind of talk about emotional regulation in that I don't know if it was just the kind of Gen X is just bad at this, but we don't, or maybe it's the baby boomer generations didn't really regulate their emotions well. But to kind of go back in your situation, like I don't know that I would have been able to regulate my emotions. I wear my emotions on a sleeve. I mean, anything can send me into outer space. I might read an email and I think I read the tone wrong or somebody kind of disrespects me at work or something. And maybe it was unintentional. I usually tend to launch into outer space on that. And that, talking to my wife, she thinks that's kind of a form of anxiety because you're worried about your perception or what people think of you or what your abilities are. So that's where I kind of deal with, and a lot of mine is anxiety. I think anger and anxiety are two different things, but there's a point where there's a confluence there, like where they do come together at some point, especially. And that's kind of why I ask about if you were angry, because when you have frustration or an injustice done to you, you get that irritation or rage or really probably more resentment. And anxiety is worried about the future. But with me, like in my job or something, I'll feel like there's some injustice or something happened to me or I got micromanaged and I get angry. And then I start on the anxiety trip of contingency planning. Okay, I'm going to get home tonight. I'm going to go on Indeed and JS Firm and find every single job possible because I can't do this shit anymore. And what happens is you get these cortisol spikes and you try to find a way out instead of really probably dealing with the situation at hand. Have you dealt with any of that, like in that
Yeah,
genre of
100% for
thought?
sure. And I want to walk back and say that like I don't I have anger, and it's directed at myself though, because I know that I could have made things that I could have made decisions earlier that might have better affected the outcome of my life or my marriage or whatever. My anger is not placing blame externally. It's all directed at me. So I don't want to say that I'm not an angry person. I have anger. It's directed inward, and I've done a lot better job of not kind of like showing my frustration. Certainly, it has like boiled over every aspect of my life, whether it be kids, or ex-spouse, or professionally, whatever. But one thing I wanted to ask you, kind of turn around to you for 1 second, was that you say that you have a tendency to pop off, like get pissed or express anger to about stupid email or something doesn't go right at work, or your son doesn't clean his room, or whatever, and there's a flash of anger. But you and I have flown together, and granted, like I have not flown with you in a combat setting, but I'm guessing that as a white lead in the 160, if something were to go wrong in the cockpit, be it RP inbound or during the extraction or whatever, or you guys get an emergency in an actual aircraft emergency, your first response is not going to be like, what the fuck, man, this is fucking bullshit. It's not going to be to blow up and express anger and like tell everybody how stupid everything is and I can't believe we went with this plan instead of that plan. The first response is going to be for you, I'm guessing, is going to be kind of that sense of like that preternatural sense of calm. Like they talk about like Chuck Yeager when he's like his aircraft is coming apart like near the speed of sound, the dude's just like, whatever, I'm going to handle it. And I'm guessing when the chips are down, that's how you and most of the people that operate in that level of experience would tend to operate. And so my question is, what is it that allows you to behave in such a calm and concerted manner in the cockpit and when the chips are down? But when it's like a tiny, stupid email that is like going to blow away like a fart in the wind tomorrow because nobody cares about some silly thing on email that is going to absolutely like drive you bonkers and live in your head. You're going to have to, go complain to Patty and you're going to fire off an email that you're going to regret the next day. Why are those things, why is the inconsequential event get more attention than the life-threatening event that is going to require all of your attention and the attention of the three other members of your group?
Ooh, that's good. That's really good. Actually, I never put those together until right now. And I think I said this in the podcast with Tyler, is why I love being an assault pilot. It's a Jesus take the wheel moment where I can control what I can control. And if something happens, I just have to react by the numbers, if that makes sense. Where, first things first, do this, second thing, third thing. In those situations, I feel like there's almost like a guardrail system. If I don't do this, we're all going to die. So the choice is calm down and do the thing, or freak out and everybody dies. I mean, I'm being a little dramatic, but that's really good. That's really good because I didn't really think of it that way. And there's some part of me that, like, when I get that email and I want to pop off, I mean, you hear me. I mean, I probably blow your phone up. It's gotten better, but like, I probably used to blow your phone up with
I love it.
dumb shit that doesn't really make a difference about anything. But I think it kind of comes back to that emotional regulation and I don't mean regulation like regulating your emotions, where when I don't have those constraints, it's not laser focused on what needs to happen. I think I'm fairly confident I have undiagnosed ADHD, which I think makes me a really good pilot. Like, I can listen to 7 radios at once. I can use both my hands and both my feet, and I feel at equilibrium there. If I'm not constantly stimulated, I can fall asleep at, on a whim. And so kind of get back to your point is when you have to be laser focused on a thing because there are real consequences, it makes it very easy. And my wife will tell you this, and I perform my best under extreme pressure. Like once when my oldest kid broke her nose once, and my wife was, there's blood everywhere. My wife was freaking out, and I just went into calm. Okay, first and my son cut himself really bad when he was a really little baby, and his little teeth cut through his lip and blood everywhere. And it was super calm. Or I've been where a super bad car accident where a guy lost his arm. And I remember I was probably like 1 year into the army, and I just saw this. It was like a panel van do like a motorcycle cut this guy off, and he swerved and hit like a curb and did like something out of like the A Team, like a barrel roll in this like A Team looking van. And if anybody doesn't know what the A Team is, you should just watch it. It's a great show. But they flipped over, and I was literally right behind him. And I remember running up to the accident, and there was a lady still buckled in her seatbelt in the passenger side, and I was able to get her out. And then she was freaking out about her husband was still in the car, and I'm like, "There's nobody else in the car," and I'm thinking he got ejected. I went back into the van. The van's upside down, and I go back into the van because the back doors were blown out, and I was able to walk like on the roof into the van. And this guy was wedged between where the window, the windshield was, and the roof. Like he had went through the windshield, and the van drove over the top of him, like skidded over the top of him, and it cut his arm off. And I remember getting to him and realizing he was there, and probably about 50% of his torso was under the van. And I remember, this is a long story to get to the point, but I remember his arm was hanging on by like sinew, like right, like just muscle. It looked like like when you cut a steak and the little fat still connected to the other piece of meat. That's what it looked like. And I remember, I'd probably been in the army like a year, and I was like, I gotta stop the bleed. Like it was just by the numbers. Like the training kicked in. This was a situation. There was no time to freak out. We got to go to work. And I remember a cop, Daytona Beach cop, came up to me, and he kind of started losing his shit because this dude didn't have an arm. Well, it was hanging on by a thread and fucking blood everywhere. He's like, and I was like, give me your belt. And the guy's like, and he had his like patrol belt on, like this big, thick leather ones that you hang your gun on. I'm like, not that belt, fucking idiot. Like the little belt, like your belt's holding your pants up. And he got his belt off, and I made like a tourniquet and blah, blah, blah. But the point is, when I have guardrails where I have to do something, everything gets real crystal clear, and the bullshit goes to the side and focus on the mission. But I think when you're in real life and you don't have those guardrails, my emotions just kind of run wild, and I go into that contingency mode, which is really a form of anxiety, saying like they don't like you, or they think you're an idiot, or I'm like mind reading. I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying.
That makes perfect sense. And you hit it with the guardrails. The stakes are a lot higher when a guy is going to lose his arm on the side of the road. You happen to come upon him. That's not the time to be cursing the universe for that unfortunate guy and the fact that the cop couldn't figure out which belt to do. The time is to help the guy that's going to lose his arm. And the time is not to freak out about the plan when something goes wrong in the cockpit. There's no time for that. The stakes are way too high to be MFing everybody and cursing the universe for how everything has gone wrong on the mission today. But I think it's something that's probably human nature. Maybe I could probably do some research on this on my own. Why on a daily basis, though, do we allow ourselves to get sucked into a place of anger or anxiety about things that really are just so tenuous and so temporary anyway, and really, for the most part, inconsequential. But there's just, why does that urgent, not important piece of the puzzle get so much of our emotional energy? Not just our time, but our emotional investment, and drive our behavior and our emotions.
That's a really good observation. And I think there's probably a lot of people out there that deal with this. And Tyler and I were talking about it. Tyler, you're like super popular on this one. He talks about being emotionally disconnected when something happens at work and somebody kind of has a little bit of a tude with him or will direct him to do something. He's just like, okay, and no emotion at all. And they might get even madder because he's not matching their emotional energy. And afterwards, I'm like, man, didn't that really irritate you? And he's like, it's just a job. I'm emotionally disconnected. I really don't care. And a lot of people say that. I mean, I've gone through this so much time where I say I don't care, but then you end up do caring. I mean, you really, and I don't know if it's because you really actually care about your job. I think what it really is you care about how people perceive you. Does that make sense? So if you don't do a good job and you're not, especially from a military background where you excellence is expected and demanded every day, if you don't meet people's, or not even people's expectations, your own generated expectations, what other people think you should perform, you feel like you're kind of a turd, or at least I do. Like I feel like a turd, and I want people to look at me like, oh, that's the guy, that's the dude that gets things done. But really, you just end up being really tired and really worn down, and then you see the other guy that's completely emotionally disconnected is like living his best life. And so I think there's something to that. I don't know how to get to that point. There has to be some happy medium between being emotionally disconnected but also fulfilled in the, because if you come to work every day and you punch the clock and you're just sucking up 8 hours and you're completely agnostic to what you're doing, I don't know that that's the way to live. But maybe there's some in between there.
Yeah, I think there is. Maybe Tyler could run his own podcast and explain to us, the rest of us mere mortals, how that is possible.
Yeah.
I would certainly like to know. It's kind of a monastic life where you can live in a monastery and be disconnected, but is your life really that fulfilled? I mean, from the outset, like, are you really living a fulfilling life if you're just completely disconnected from everything? That, maybe that's one extreme, but like you said, like there has to be some other, the fulfillment side. There has to be that human connection. There has to be some emotion in your life. If there's no joy without a little bit of sorrow. You have to temper it somewhere. You can't just live your entire life in this sense of complete disconnection. You're just a rock.
I think with him, there's when he emotionally is disconnected, he doesn't wade into people's bullshit. Like when they are throwing out those vibes, like, who's really good at this? Greg. Yeah, we have a
Oh,
mutual
definitely.
friend, Greg.
Yeah, you sure.
Greg is really good. It's just he can kind of like hover above the fray. Like nothing really gets to him. And I always admire that about him. I'm like, man, how does this not bother you? Where I kind of take everything personally. And so I think for being emotionally disconnected is you just don't get sucked into other people's bullshit. And I'm get sucked in like a tractor beam every single time. And
Yeah.
I probably actually look for it. So that's something I've got to work on. I wanted to go back to something you said about your marriage. You said that, I don't know if you said you could have done this better or you should have done this better, or does it matter? Is it a could or a should?
What's that? What should I have done better?
Like you said there are things that you think you could have done better in your marriage or fixed in your marriage to make it the outcome not what it is, or were you saying you should have?
I,
Is it like
I,
a fork in the road question or a regret thing?
I think it's a little bit of a regret thing. I think there were just opportunities that I could have changed and grown a long time ago, and I just didn't pick up what she was putting down, despite the fact that I was living and sleeping next to this person every night, mostly for 20 years. I just did not pick up on the depth of her dissatisfaction. And looking back, all the warning signs were there, like all the master caution lights were on. I just either ignored them or thought they were something else or wrote them off as to just, midlife malaise, when in fact there was her dissatisfaction with our relationship and me as a person. And I regret that. I regret that I didn't find the need to make bigger changes sooner, and I should have. And I'll own that.
Have you ever heard of shoulding all over yourself? Have you heard that?
No, but that's a great description.
Yeah, that's a cognitive distortion. Is that my Army psychologist, Dr. Jenna Brown Morgan? Shout out to Jenna. She would always say, like, you're shoulding all over yourself. Like you're shitting all over yourself, but shoulding all over yourself. That those statements are like pressure on yourself that leads to guilt or frustration about something. But the truth is, in your situation, obviously not a psychologist or anything, but you were saying all the warning signs were there and all the things were there, but is it really your job to like pry into those emotional things and weed through and hack through the jungle to figure out what she really wants? Or like, I kind of think that the other person has to own a little bit of that by not being very direct. And that's not, women don't do that, but I just wanted to bring that up because when you should all over yourself, it's like, have you seen that show on Apple TV called Dark Matter?
I've read the book.
Oh, okay. So did you like the book?
I did. I have not.
I kind of feel like you would like the show. I just had a feeling you would like it.
I'll check the show out. I have not seen the show.
I'm sure the book is better, but the thing that makes me think about this is, how if people haven't read the book or seen the show, I don't want to ruin it, but it talks about parallel universes and the universe that, if you believe in parallel, the multiverse and string theory and blah blah blah, that's a whole nother show. But which I'm kind of into that stuff, closet nerd here. But if let's just suppose that that's true, that there is a multiverse, and in the show Dark Matter, this guy like figures out how to go to different universes that are parallel universes, and it's pretty interesting. It kind of actually goes into what we're talking about. I don't know, in the book, does he talk about, the was the guy's name Jason in the book? Do you remember?
I think so. It's been a while since I read it.
The main character's Jason, and like there's like bad Jason and good Jason.
Yes.
And bad Jason kind of eventually, basically, not spoiler, if you're watching the show, turn it off right now, or turn this podcast off right now. But bad Jason goes to good Jason's universe because he had this regret about not getting with the love of his life, and he chose a different path. And but he gets into good Jason's universe and basically takes over his life and moves in with his good Jason's wife, which is his girlfriend from years ago. And he kind of gets to the point where he's like, oh, actually, I don't really like this. Like, it's not what I thought it would be. My point, to tie it back to the shoulding all over yourself, is like, we only can live in this universe. Like, this is the only world that we live in. And actually, Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V? You ever heard of this guy?
Yeah.
He has this whole thing about like all the decisions you ever make are the right ones, because that's the only way it could be, because we can't go back and change things. We can't go to a parallel universe and adjust things. So all the decisions you made are the right ones. And for me, I think there's a lot of, when I think about I should have done this, or I have anxiety about, oh man, I should have studied more for this test, or I should have prepared more for this job, or I should have got that degree. That's not the way the world was supposed to lay out. I'm not talking about a predetermined existence. I'm just talking about you have to be present in the present, if that kind of makes sense. And so all the decisions you made up to this point were the right ones because it led you to this point. Because if you made a different decision, that would have been the right decision. I don't know if that really makes sense what I'm saying, but does that make sense to you, or am I like way out of
it? Makes perfect sense. I just read another book. I know this is not a book podcast, but maybe we should do a book podcast.
Yeah, I love. We always talk about books. We got a lot. I love books. I like the idea of reading books more than reading books.
I recently read a book called The Midnight Library that is very similar in vein with the multiverse parallel universes kind of stuff. But it talks about that Gary Vee idea that every the life you're living now is the perfect life because all your decisions have brought you to this moment. The collection of decisions that is your life is brought you to this moment. So it must be the perfect life. In so many words, it must be the right life for you.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole thing about anxiety is like to get people were like, this is how you overcome anxiety and this is how you beat anxiety. I don't think that's ever going to happen. Maybe some people can. I think you have to learn to deal with it, and I don't know that it ever really goes away. I mean, in my experience, I don't know that it ever goes away, but the biggest thing is to kind of defeat or kind of, I don't want to say defeat, but halt anxiety is live in the present. Like I'm living today. I'm thinking about what's happening today. And that's really a lot easier said than done. Like I'm terrible at this, but when you really kind of stop back or stop and think about it and suck air through your nose and breathe out through your mouth, shit's okay. Like, I don't know if, yeah, I think you've heard me say this, but like most of the people that, if you're listening to this podcast, there's like a 99% chance you've got a roof over your head. You shit in water cleaner than 90% of the world drinks. You're not going to go hungry here in this country. I mean, it might suck, but like you can get some ramen noodles or you can go to a soup kitchen. Like the world, all your Maslow's hierarchy of needs are probably met, assuming you're listening to a podcast. So if you can live in the present and focus on today, I think that is like 80% of the anxiety battle right there. Like because anxiety is you're worried about like what you said, what's happening in the future. But if you're not focused on the future and you're focused on the now you if you have depression and anxiety, now you're only dealing with depression. Does that make sense?
Sure, that's like the crux of a lot of meditative practices are focused on that, of just bringing you into the moment and not letting your thoughts run away with you because they're just thoughts. They're just invasive pieces of information being relayed to your nervous system via neurons, and they're nothing more than just a bunch of neurons firing and giving you ideas that, for the most part, are not really true. They're just thoughts and feelings are working together to make you anxious about things that have yet to even exist.
Yeah, I think that's a really good. I mean, in full disclosure, I'm super terrible about living in the present, and I've tried to meditate, and I don't get it. I usually end up falling asleep. I think I'm just doing it wrong. Like I just don't. It's not that I can't do it. I'm just not very good, and you got to work at it. I think so. I think you said you don't meditate, right?
I don't. I did for a couple of years, and it was kind of like on the advice of Rich Roll and just some other stuff. It was a few years back. Like I had a pretty good practice going for like 20 minutes a day, but I just didn't feel like I was getting out of it what everybody told me I should be getting out of it. Some people like just swear up and down. Like a very close friend here, the firefighter, who swears up and down by meditation and a really deep practice that affects him really, really deeply and helps him work through a lot of stuff. And he's like, man, you got to go back to it. I did it for a couple of years, and I just didn't feel like I got there. But like I said, when I run, it's not meditation, but it is meditative in the sense that I'm alone with my thoughts and my pain, physical and sometimes emotional while I'm running. And it just allows my brain to kind of go where it needs to go. And yes, I should be, if it was truly meditation, I would only be focused on my breathing and not allowing thoughts to come in. But in a sense, meditation, you're not stopping the thought. You're just allowing it to kind of come in, and you can look it over and examine it and feel it and touch it, and then you kind of just release the thought into the ether. And I feel like personally, my time is better spent running than it was just sitting in the darkness. Man, I wish I could get there because so many people speak so highly of it. Maybe I was doing it wrong.
Do you know that guy Wim Hof, the Iceman?
I do, yes.
I have a friend that's really like super into breath work, and I think there's probably something to that too. I've tried it a few times. I've done the cold plunge and then the regulating your breathing. I'd like to explore that more, but I'm also really lazy and I don't ever get around to it. But I've heard that that is pretty helpful also. So with that being said, what about, when I wanted to talk a little about, because we're both pilots, we both have to deal with FAA, and if you don't know that anxiety can be a career ender in the FAA for your commercial license. And for me, I had a scare last year. I got caught up with the VA, and my medical got flagged as underreported from basically the FAA tapped into all the VA disability records, and I think 5 or 6 thousand guys got caught up. Mine was kind of an administrative thing. It got worked out, but I did at one point I had a diagnosis of adjustment disorder with anxiety. And adjustment disorder, for people that don't know, is you have a difficult time dealing with big changes. And mine came from getting out of the army and becoming a civilian. And so I had to report that to the FAA. And so just to let all the guys know, just because you have depression and anxiety doesn't mean you can't be a pilot. Rick, you chime in here, but I would say that your mental health is more important than your license. Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is don't hide it to keep working.
Yeah, I have many thoughts on this regarding the FAA and how they handle mental health issues inside and outside aviation and sort of with the U.S. military. Probably a different podcast, but the FAA has historically done an extraordinarily terrible job of handling mental health issues with veterans as a population of the pilot community as a whole, and then also just within the general kind of, I want to say general aviation, but it's mostly concerning commercial pilots and air transport pilots, airline pilots. I just don't think, and it took so long. I mean, you and I were both in the military long before mental health was a thing that could be spoken about openly or even provided avenues to seek help or tell someone that you were struggling with something. There was just almost no, when I went to the Naval Academy in 1992, there was zero emphasis on suicide awareness, mental health issues, and how to cope with either of those things. It had taken just an absolute, the human toll over 20 years of losing soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines as well to suicide and mental health issues, that it would finally have the military say, hey, we need to provide better avenues for guys to seek help. And I think the FAA is literally, I think their FAA is at the point now where the military was like 30 years ago. And say what you want about the U.S. military, but it is often at the leading edge of some real medical and kind of policy changes that often takes the United States a long time to catch up on, because the military is sort of it's a cross section of society, but it's also a kind of a no cost human laboratory with subjects that are available for testing at whim. And the military has, over the course of my 20-ish plus years as a uniformed service member, see that change. It's literally, the FAA is now just even admitting they have a problem with mental health and how pilots can seek help or seek treatment within the scope of their requirements and their guidelines is where the military was 30 years ago. So I think it's going to be a long, long road for guys to find what they would consider acceptable treatments or find kind of off ramps that would allow them to kind of get out of the cockpit for a while and get the help they need, and then get back into the cockpit with kind of no retribution or no loss in seniority or whatever airline pilots deal with. It's just, to me, it still seems like it's just an absolute career ender. And I've done the piece where I fess up to the FAA, and before I went and got my first medical out of the Army, and it's a process, and it was painful for me, and I'm sure it's a lot more painful for guys with even bigger issues than what I have. It's a problem, and honestly, the treatment options are very, very limited if you have any sort of commercial license, and I think The FAA knows they have a problem. I think they're just in the stages of, hey, we have a problem. Now what do we do?
Yeah, and I think there was that whole thing with the VA. There was I don't know if this is true, but I heard the rumor that there was a guy at the FAA that just had an axe to grind with all these vets getting disability, and then but also being able to still continue to work. And I think people think when you talk about VA, it's people leave the last part off. It's VA disability compensation, and the whole. I just wish they would change the name because it makes you sound like you're not able to work or you're not able to contribute, and that's not what it is. It's you look at another 40-year-old that did 20 years in the military, you compare that 40-year-old to a 40-year-old that's been a civilian, just the I don't know what's that word? What is a bone?
Osteoarthritis?
What is it? What
Oh, osteopathic?
osteoarthritis? Yeah, that osteopathic issues are way skyrocketed in the guy that did 20 years in the military. I mean, on the pilot scene, the cancer rates alone for guys that are exposed to military aviation are like off the charts compared to the civilian population. So there needs to be, and when we all signed up, we're doing it for whatever reason it was. The majority of those people had good intentions. Like I'd say a small population was like, I just want college to pay for it. I don't really care. But a lot of those people were apple pie in America, and there was some kind of honorable reason. I'm not saying that getting your college paid for is not honorable. I'm just saying the intent when you sign up for something, like when you're a kid and then 20 years later when you're an adult and you have all these medical things, that there should be some level of compensation for that. So that soapbox rant complete, but I think that guy at the FAA just had an axe to grind, so he went after the guys in the VA, and there is a lot of fraud. There is a lot of folks that claim PTSD, but the flip side of that is you don't really know what other people are dealing with. You don't know. I was telling my wife, she kind of specializes working with trauma and PTSD stuff, and she had told me I made a comment about some like guy that has PTSD, and I'm like, that guy never left. Like he did one deployment and he never left the fob, or never, like nobody ever shot at him. Or she had made the point is like, you don't know what has happened in his life. There might have been an event that was some type of sexual assault, or who knows, God knows what is going on with him, but you don't know what's happening with each person. So judge not yet, least you be judge yourself, or whatever that verse is. But the point is, I was in that camp of like, oh, that guy's full of shit, or that guy's just, and there are those people like there's some people you can just be like, dude, like, come on. But it's not our place. It's not our place to judge on the merit of what their claim is. They were adjudicated by the Veterans Administration to be, righteous claim, and they're awarded that. So that's it. But for the FAA to come in and say, like for my issues, I had to go and do this whole thing, and my stuff was kind of an acute thing that really the FAA sees it is, if you had an acute issue, that becomes a diagnosis. And even though it was a one-time thing and I don't receive compensation for it, it still affected my medical. I was able to get it back by the grace of God. I'm still flying and everything's on the up and up with the FAA, but a lot of guys don't have that ability, and they're just kind of blade running every day with real issues. That doesn't mean they can't. It's crazy that we can put these guys in combat situations and they put them in traumatic situations. They overcome it, and we turn them out again to do it over and over and over again. Yet when they get out, they're not capable of making a milk run from Detroit to New York. You know what I'm saying? Like it's so antiquated. Like you said, it's just the FAA is just so far behind. But I would say to the folks that are in that situation is get a really good AME. For the uninitiated, that's a aeromedical examiner. They're like regular doctors that have some specialized training from the FAA. But if you get a really good AME that can kind of walk you through what it looks like and what the other side, and like my AME is a really good guy, and he'll tell me straight up, hey, this is, he told me, he's like, hey, your case is a slam dunk. This is not a big deal. We're going to get through it. And like 3 months later, I was through it. I got a guy that I work with, not mental health related, but some neurological stuff. He looked at his stuff and he's like, this is going to be a long road. And so I think you need to find a compassionate AME that I don't want to say has some reviews, but other people have used and can tell you like, hey, this guy's just here for the money. He's going to stick to the letter of the law, or this guy's going to help you as much as he can to get through this and kind of guide you and how to do that. So I don't know if that's been your experience, but that's been mine here for me.
Yeah, absolutely. What you said is that AME is your trip guide through the FAA medical wilderness. My guy is super experienced. He has like many of the doctors. I think up at Oklahoma City, the headquarters of the FAA has those dudes literally on his cell. And I was sitting in his office, and he'll like place a call, like administratively, there was something screwed up on my medical, and he just called one of the doctors, like, oh yeah, here I'll change it in the computer right now, because he has personal relationships with like the head AMEs that work in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, so same with my guy, same thing.
It's like everywhere. It's the relationships that are the most important for that piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. So what else about, we were kind of really circling around anxiety. Do you have any other thoughts on it as a whole, or anything that you wanted to talk about, or you think that other people could benefit from hearing?
I am no like font of wisdom when it comes to dealing with anxiety. For the longest time, I didn't really know what it was or why I wasn't quote happy, until my wife at the time like gave me the breakfast diagnosis of, she's like, you're depressed, you have anxiety. She's like, you need to do something about it, or it's gonna destroy you. And that was a long time ago. But it wasn't really until then that no one had ever told me that. No one, like, she was the first one to say, well, you have like a legitimate mental health concern that if you don't do something about, or at least find some mitigation strategies for yourself, you're going to be either miserable or worse. So thanks to her, I was able to kind of like do some self-coaching, and which is really all I do now, is stuff like talking to you. I read quite a bit about it. I have read quite a bit about it. I've tried stuff that works. I've tried stuff that doesn't work. I've tried like stupid nutritional supplements like a long time ago, nothing like crazy, like St. John's wort or something, which like absolutely did not work, probably because it was sawdust and styrofoam packaged in China, and that I paid like $20 for a bottle of. But I think there's a lot of people out there selling or offering ideas of quick solutions and things that are going to give you like a quick hit of feel good, and the world is just full of that kind of stuff today. And I just don't, like you said, I don't believe there's curing it. I think there's effective mitigation strategies, and there's effective treatments. I don't think for me, there's not a cure. It's just something that I live with, and that some days I do a better job of mitigating, and other days I do not so great a job of mitigating. So I'd say for me, the most important thing for me is exercise. And it's I know when I don't exercise, and it's a daily thing for me, either like lifting or running or a combination of the two, I feel better. And if I don't exercise, I feel like kind of pent up and weird. And I get like a little in my head, and I'm short with people, and kind of confused. So it helps me kind of find my own way through the day if I do some good quality exercise on a daily basis. And I what does that look like as you age? That changes. I'm going to be 50 this year, so that is going to look different in 5 years and probably 10 years from now. It's certainly like 10 years ago, I'm like, oh my god, I'm really going to be 50. So my exercise routines and regimen and what I can handle is different than what I can handle 10 years ago. But for me, it's exercise followed closely by sleep. I'm a huge sleep Nazi when it comes to how I sleep and what I do. I know you and Tyler talked about kind of some sleep discipline stuff, and that's a huge thing. I put my phone on my nightstand just because it's my alarm and my little, like, my light, but I try not to look at anything once I'm in bed. I don't have a television. I live by myself, so I don't have a television in my room. My bed is for sleeping and other human interaction only. That's it. I don't like lay in my bed and watch TV, and I don't lay in my bed and like look at my phone. I read in bed and then I go to sleep, and that's it. So, and that allows me to kind of create that sleep environment because I absolutely need 7 hours of sleep. If I don't, I start getting really weird. I can run for a few days on like 5 to 6, and then it's like I really got to get back in there and program myself for a catch up day and get into 7 hours again. But for me, it's exercise, sleep, and then eating, which is also kind of a tertiary thing. But you always feel better when you eat right, and if you're putting garbage into your body, you're not going to feel great. That's not like revolutionary for anyone to hear, but those kind of things are three things that I can do daily that affect my well-being.
Yeah, I was kind of to dovetail on the eating part. I was in Israel a while back with the IDF, and I remember the whole time I was in Israel, the food was like this normal Mediterranean diet, but it was always so fresh. I felt just better by, eating your food as medicine, I guess. I just felt so much better just on that non-processed kind of fresh lot of hummus and lettuce and typical Mediterranean things, but it was seriously a game changer. And I'm kind of falling off because I think, are you still a vegetarian?
I'm not. I fell off that, but man, it's funny you mentioned that because I am considering going back to it. I just kind of I want to do it better than I did last time, but I would consider going back to it.
Yeah, I like meat, but I just when I don't eat processed foods, I feel so much better. And I think I would agree with you. For me, physical activity is is up there, and I also think talking to people, and especially when you deal with people that are our age, and if you're in your mid 30s, 40s, 50s, and up, you need to have candid conversations with people that either can understand or maybe not in the same sense. It's hard. Like I was saying earlier, I don't know that your spouse or significant other is the best person for that because, like again, I'm sure there's lots of psychologists and people that say no, it should be an equal two-way street. But I'm telling you, somewhere in your DNA, it's men and women aren't meant to interact like that. And maybe that's just from my personal experience. But you had even said earlier that your wife said, "Hey, you're," when she told you that you're just depressed and have anxiety. Was it more of a she's there to nurture and support you, or is it more of like, "Hey, you've got depression, and anxiety, and you need to figure it out"? Which one of the two was it?
Oh, it was completely the latter. It was she was
Yeah,
telling
yeah.
telling me to like go fix my stuff.
Yeah. And I've had the exact same experience. Again, my wife, I know for a fact, loves me and, not worships the ground I walk on, but we have a really great relationship. I have no issues. I'm just saying in women's DNA, the way they would talk to their friend, like their girlfriend about it, would not be the same way they talk to you about it because they always want to see the husband as like that provider, they got their own mental things to deal with. They can't deal with your mental things. And so that's why I say like you got to talk to somebody, um, a friend, make yourself a podcast because I've been to a lot of therapists and I just can't find the right one. It's kind of like every time I go to a therapist, and I think it's important to talk to a therapist because just me hearing the sound of my own voice talking about my own issues, I kind of go, well, yeah, actually, like when I actually hear myself saying, I sound like a little bitch, and really isn't that bad. But if you don't say it, you're stuck alone with your thoughts, and so I think talking to somebody is like my number two. And I would also there are lots of resources you can go to a psychologist or a licensed mental health counselor. There's also BetterHelp. I actually used BetterHelp. What I liked about BetterHelp, if that's the app where you can go on there, it's not super pricey, but it's kind of pricey. I actually had a decent therapist. I really liked him, but it just got too cookie cutter. Like I don't know that if he was like really connecting with me. At first I thought he was, but what's nice about BetterHelp, you can fire him on the spot and they just assign you a new one. And there's no like weird, it's not face to face. So it's like, keyboard warriors. You're just kind of behind there, like this dude sucks, next. And like they give you a new guy. So a couple other things that I do, there's people talk about mindfulness and meditation. We already beat that one up. I'm not great at that. Some people do journaling. Also, I'm not that guy, but I know dudes that do. And then one I think is kind of cognitive behavioral techniques is where you kind of reframe the situation and use different perspectives to reduce the intensity. And I do this one, like when I get an email and it kind of pisses me off, I'll kind of think, okay, was this? I kind of put myself in their position and go, was he just were they just giving me the facts and it came off that way, or did they intentionally set out to do whatever? So I think that if you can reframe things or challenge your thoughts, like you said, that can help too. And then one thing that I think another one is self compassion. You had said something earlier that you have bad days, and I think if you realize that it's okay to be okay, it's sometimes it's okay. Like my wife always says, it's okay. We'll start fresh tomorrow, and you can always just start the next day, start over again. And some people would say, well, what if you can't start over tomorrow? Who the fuck cares? You're dead. Doesn't matter anyway. So you can always start again the next day. So give yourself a little compassion. And, my wife always says, if our kids came to us and were talking to us, would you be as hard on them as you are on yourself? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. Like they're human and they screw up. She's like, well, then why wouldn't you give yourself the same grace? So I think that those are kind of mine that might help in those situations. So
Yeah, man, those are some great tools. That no question about that. Especially, I like the last one about you wouldn't talk to when I say do some self coaching, which it really means like treating yourself as a third party individual or as if you were advising a friend on what to do. You wouldn't tell your friend, oh, dude, you suck, man. Why are you even attempting that? Just give it up already, dude. Like you're so far behind. You're absolutely worthless. Why would you even attempt that? You wouldn't tell that to a friend. Why do you allow that voice to run wild in your head with those words?
yeah, and I think that's why having conversations and talking to somebody like a therapist are really good, because it's kind of ready made for this thing. It's kind of like what I talked about with George, our trainer, is there's accountability there. If you constantly talk about these things, it will create a thought pattern that when they come up, you can recognize it quicker. If you go for really long spreads without talking about things, it's going to take you that long to unpack everything. And so if you can do that maintenance conversations with people, be it a therapist, be it a friend, and I think too, you really probably have better conversations with people that don't know you. And I'm not saying that for everybody, but maybe the person you want to have these conversations with is not it could be your brother, but somebody that doesn't know that their worldview of you and their preconceived things of you when might cause problems, if that makes sense. Or you might be less like on this podcast, like my kids want to listen and I'm like, I really don't want you guys to listen to this because I don't want you to see me vulnerable in these conversations, but I also understand that it's kind of necessary for them to see that. But I kind of think of this, and this is kind of crass, but it's like when you're taking a dump and somebody walks in on you, that's like one of my worst fears. If I'm at a gas station or something, you ever been to those gas stations? You got to get the key,
Yes.
and there's like, it's a single spot in there, and like somebody, you ever had a dude like just walk in on you, and you're just in that really vulnerable situation
Yes.
where you can't fight because you're dropping a deuce and like there's nothing you can do. It's like worst situation imaginable. This is how this feels for me, like talking about all this stuff. But I know that's kind of goofy, but
It's a perfect analogy.
but you kind of need to. And so get your maintenance talks in, get to the fucking gym, go run, whatever you got to do. But if you don't deal with it, it's you go to places you don't want to go. So what's next for Rick?
Oh
What do
man,
you got next on the horizon?
I wish I could tell you. I have gotten serious finally about a couple things that I wanted to do. I recently, one of my coworkers, one of the other pilots, ran across the Grand Canyon, just a rim to rim run. It's nothing crazy. It's doable by many humans each year. It's about 20 miles down to the bottom, start at the south rim and finish on the north, or vice versa. So I've mostly committed myself to doing that this year. I probably hopefully knock that out in November. So I am, as much as I use the word training, I'm kind of training for that right now. Professionally, I enjoy my job. I'm not married to it. I wouldn't mind going somewhere else for maybe a little bit better financial picture in the short run. I'm not. That's kind of a touchy subject, but I don't have a great idea of what I want to do. I would like to build up a little nest egg here in the next couple of years so that I could do more of what I really want, which is kind of more like triathlon, like endurance racing kind of stuff. And I feel like my job just kind of gets in the way of what I really want to do. So if I was more financially independent, I think that those things might be a little bit more available to me. So I'm kind of trying to make some moves to work to that end.
Yeah, if you would ask me 5 years ago what I would be doing in 5 years, I would tell you this is how it all is going to go down. And I think the older you get, the more now somebody's like, hey, what's next year look like, or 2 years from now? I think you're not as naive, and I say I don't really know, and I think that's okay. Like I'm okay with being like, man, well, I don't know. Where are you gonna be living? Fuck if I know. Like I would like to continue living here, but if another opportunity came up that fit the bill, I would not leave myself open to change careers, change. If I could be a podcast host and do this, pull a Joe Rogan, yeah, that sounds awesome. But I think it's important, like you said, if you not that you're planning your life out, but if you know that you want to be in that kind of endurance ultra not ultra are you looking at ultra marathons and
Yeah,
stuff?
I would like
That
to do an
seems
ultra. Yeah.
yeah, like those I think it's all in the art of doable. Again, this is another Tyler story. He just went to Scotland with a bunch of guys from our old organization, and they did this Allied Forces Foundation, basically like I think it was 56-mile ruck march through the Scottish Highlands, and they did it in like 19 hours or something like that.
That's awesome.
And yeah, but he just got back to work yesterday, and just hearing him just so excited about doing something outside of that kind of mundane existence that we have at work. It's kind of enough that like that was his drug. And then now he's talking about next year he's going to do two loops, and he's going to do this more endurance racing and stuff. So I think there's something to having like some type of hobby that gives you sense of purpose. For me personally, I haven't found that yet. I don't know what that is, but I'm open to it. So I think your plan to do the Grand Canyon run, which sounds awesome and equally horrible at the same time. But I'm more of like, I just like to lift weights, and my running days are over. I've got a bum hip, but I think I think that's right up your alley. And,
Yeah.
and also, you ever see these people like I was thinking this the other day. This is rabbit hole, but I watched this lady get out of her car. I was sitting at a stoplight, and this lady got out of her car, and she was probably mid 60s, early 70s, and she was obese. And then I like looked around the parking lot. I was like at a stoplight by a TJ Maxx, and everybody was fat. And I just started thinking like, man, when I'm like 65, I want to still be lifting weights and not fat. And I'm not looking at them with disgust. I look at them like, how sad, like to kind of, to get to that point. Not that maybe there was something outside their ability, who knows what the reason was. I just know that that can't be me. So I think it's admirable to do things and to keep busy and to stay in shape and do things within the limits of what your body can do. And if that means maybe you only do yoga or you do, some form of stretching, that's good enough. So, all right, that's my rabbit hole complete about elderly fat people. So sorry, old
No,
folks. But yeah, man. Well, hey, we're at that's 2.5 hours. So
bro.
we put 2.5 in the book today. I really appreciate you taking the time and coming on here and talking about it. And we should do it again sometime.
Thank you, man. It is awesome. It was awesome for me as well, and I hope that you continue to knock it out of the park with your podcast, man. I love it.
Yeah, I'm hoping. Like I said, the whole reason for this is really like my version of self therapy, and I just changed the name because you've been around since the beginning. Bounced out ideas off of you, and I kind of changed it to Alone and Unafraid. I think it resonates a little bit better. It's a little cleaner title, and the kind of thought behind this is you're not really alone in this. Everybody's out there dealing with some version of the problem you're dealing, but you're alone in the sense that you have to take the first step to fix this. And like the old name was nobody's coming. It's up to us. It's up to you to take that first step, and that's the alone part. But the unafraid part is you don't have to be scared of this. Every dude is dealing with this at some level. Even I guarantee you, David Goggins, it has some version of all this going on, or
Yeah,
Joe Rogan, or all these guys
for
have
sure.
some version of this happening. Grant Cardone definitely does. So, anyways, man, thanks for coming on. Let's do it again sometime. And I hope everything's going well for you. And let's do it again.
You as well. Thank you so much for having me on, man. It was a real pleasure.
All right. See you.